Here's the brief news from the world over this week. Friends, colleagues, and all of America are mourning the deaths of television journalists Allison Parker and Adam Ward in Roanoke, Virginia. The two were gunned down by a former colleague on live television. The gunman was Vester Flanagan, who later shot himself. In a 23-page letter sent to ABC News, Flanagan confessed to the Wednesday murders. He wrote that it was his intent to provoke a race war, and that it was the Charleston church shooting of black congregants back in June that, quote, sent me over the top. Flanagan then launched into an expletive-laced racist tirade against the South Carolina shooter. He further saw himself as a victim, claiming he had suffered racial discrimination, sexual harassment, and bullying at work. He claimed to have been, quote, attacked for being a gay black man, end quote. The White House, Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe, and presidential candidate Hillary Clinton all suggested that the murders underscore the need for gun control legislation. President Obama said this to an ABC affiliate in Philadelphia.
What we know is that the number of people who die from gun-related incidents around this country dwarfs any deaths that happen through terrorism.
And President Obama visited New Orleans this week to mark the 10th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. His first stop, Treme, one of the oldest black neighborhoods in America. The president walked from house to house, greeting residents, and extolled the progress that's been made in the decade since the storm nearly destroyed the Crescent City.
Because of you, the people of New Orleans, working together, this city is moving in the right direction. And I have never been more confident that together we will get to where we need to go.
This marked the president's 9th visit to New Orleans. He also dropped in on Katrina's 5th anniversary in 2010. We have much more on the 10th anniversary of Katrina and my special report later in the show. And in Iraq, at least a dozen people, including 2 Iraqi generals, were killed in ISIS bombings this week. New reports indicate ISIS's apparent willingness to use chemical weapons. Experts in Syria are confirming the likely use of mustard gas on civilians there. After an attack near Aleppo this past Friday, more than 50 people began suffering from respiratory problems, skin burns, and eye irritation, consistent with exposure to the chemical agent. According to British intelligence, ISIS is now capable of manufacturing chemical weapons. Another historic site of antiquity has been destroyed by ISIS in Syria. The jihadist militants blew up the 2nd century Baal Shamin temple in the old city of Palmyra this week. The blast was so powerful it damaged some of the Roman columns that surround the ancient temple. ISIS also beheaded Khalid al-Assad, an 80-year-old scholar and archaeologist. He headed Palmyra's antiquities department for more than half a century. Meanwhile, near Homs, the Islamic State bulldozed the 5th century Saint Ilion monastery. The monastery housed the tomb of the 3rd century martyr for which it is named. Monastery priest Father Jacques Mourad was kidnapped from the area in May. He remains missing. ISIS captured the city earlier this month. 200 local residents, many of them Christians, were also abducted. Most of their fates remain unknown. And in Damascus, 2 Catholic churches were hit in mortar attacks on Sunday, including the Church of Maronite Catholic Archbishop Shamir Nassar. Fides News reports that 50 were injured and an unspecified number of people killed. The Archbishop said that living with the indiscriminate bombings of the Syrian war is a kind of Russian roulette, which is always unpredictable. Another damning undercover Planned Parenthood video was released by the Center for Medical Progress this week. In it, the head of a tissue procurement company, which partnered with Planned Parenthood, alleges that the abortion provider supplies, quote, a lot of intact bodies of aborted babies, describing them as a volume institution. Kate Dyer, CEO of STEM Express, says that her company has a heavy demand for fetal tissue, which Planned Parenthood clinics provide. At one point, Dyer laughs as she talks about the lab technicians who, quote, freak out and have meltdowns when they see intact bodies of aborted babies. STEM Express ended its relationship with Planned Parenthood last week due to the ongoing expose. And President Barack Obama is not backing down in his apparent support for Planned Parenthood. The federal government this week pulled $370,000 of health care funding from the state of Kansas. This after the state won its 3-year legal fight to defund Planned Parenthood. The 2011 law diverted $300,000 of federal family planning money away from 2 Planned Parenthood clinics. They gave the funds to other full-service health clinics. Additionally, another $300,000 was made available for pregnancy support and adoption counseling. Meanwhile, in Louisiana, on Tuesday, Planned Parenthood asked a federal court to block that state's efforts to defund its clinics. Earlier this month, Republican Governor Bobby Jindal announced plans to suspend Louisiana's contract with the abortion provider, stemming from these ongoing undercover videos. And the Little Sisters of the Poor have received a temporary reprieve from the federal contraception sterilization mandate in Obamacare. The 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in Colorado ruled that the sisters will not be subject to the Affordable Care Act's requirements or the crippling fines it could face for noncompliance. This latest court order will remain in effect until the Supreme Court decides if it will take up the nuns' appeals. If the High Court hears the case, the exemption will protect the Little Sisters until a final ruling. And the threat of an ACLU lawsuit appears to be compelling a Catholic hospital in Northern California to perform a woman's sterilization procedure. Mercy Medical Center of Redding decided that the patient can be given a tubal ligation following the birth of her baby later next month, even though the procedure would violate church teaching. The ACLU is charging that the hospital would be discriminating against the woman by denying her pregnancy-related care in choosing church doctrine over the patient's health. The patient in question is a 32-year-old attorney who says the hospital's refusal to operate would force her to travel 160 miles for the sterilization. A spokesman for the hospital said that their decision would not affect any of its future policies and that they would continue to abide by the ethical and religious directives issued by the U.S. Catholic bishops. We'll keep you posted on this one. And more than 500,000 people, including 5 cardinals and 117 bishops, have signed a petition asking Pope Francis to reinforce church teaching on marriage and the family at the upcoming Synod on the Family in October. The petition was launched earlier this year by the Catholic student group TFP Student Action. The petition asks the Pope to clear up the moral confusion that's been spreading against natural and divine law. The petition will be hand-delivered to the Vatican just ahead of the Synod on September 29th. And Cardinal William Levada, once the head of the Vatican Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, was arrested in Hawaii for drunk driving last week. The 79-year-old former Archbishop of San Francisco was pulled over on August 20th by police on the Big Island of Hawaii. He was charged with a DUI. Levada was vacationing in Hawaii with a number of priest friends. In a statement, the cardinal said he will cooperate fully with authorities, and he expressed regret for his error in judgment. He's scheduled to appear in court next month. She has been called the fastest nun in the West. Now, some faithful hope to call her saint. Sister Blandina Segale, the Italian-born nun who challenged Billy the Kid, calmed angry mobs, and helped open New Mexico Territory hospitals and schools, has faced her first test for sainthood. On Tuesday, the Archdiocese of Santa Fe opened an inquiry into Sister Blandina's heroic virtue. Her encounters with Old West outlaws became legendary and were even the subject of an episode of the CBS series Death Valley Days. Officials caution that her canonization could take some time. Though she might be the fastest nun in the West, Rome is a bit slower on the draw when declaring sainthood. We'll follow this story as long as it takes.